Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Zankichi, and it's about time. Finally going to talk about The Last of Us. Not just the first game, but part 2 as well. These games have been on my list for quite some time, especially the second game due to its notoriety. Not that I haven't played the games, by the way. Part 1 was, and still is, considered one of the best exclusive games on the PlayStation 3, with a strong narrative, gameplay mechanics, and overall presentation. And it did so well that it got remastered on the PS4 with updated graphics and sounds and tweaks that accommodates the console's technology. Part 2, on the other hand, was met with opposite criticism, mainly due to the direction the story took. I heard whispers of the game's story bombing terribly and character development being shallow, a complete contrast to what the first game did. Yet I still played it on day one because
the whispers do not speak on my behalf.
With these things in perspective, I have to ask, what makes The Last of Us story so compelling that Part 2 couldn't compete? Well, that's what I'm about to find out as I play The Last of Us 1 and 2. Let's begin, shall we? The story begins with Joel, a single father who's trying to get by to provide for his daughter Sarah. However, everything changes when a nationwide pandemic breaks out, infecting many people and turning them into mindless hosts to the cordyceps fungi, or a mutated version of it. You see, cordyceps are a real-life genus of fungi that thankfully doesn't affect humans, but the way it works is that its spores infect a species of insect, controls them to go to a specific location to then rot away as the fungus sprouts out, reproduces, and starts the infection process all over. Creepy, yet cool. Keep them away though. In this world, however, cordyceps somehow mutated and are now able to infect the human brain, making Mother Nature truly frightening. Joel and Sarah try to escape along with Joel's brother Tommy, but the chaos made it all the harder. They continue their escape while Tommy fends off a group of infected until they come across a soldier with orders to kill anyone on sight. Unable to talk sense to the man, Joel attempts to protect himself and Sarah, only to fail and see his daughter die in his arms.
Come on, baby, please. I know, baby, I know. Sarah. Baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Don't do this to me. Come on.
That scene still jerks a tear in my eye. 20 years later, Joel lives his days in a military-controlled quarantine zone in Boston, working as a smuggler with his partner Tess, who one day got a smuggling job from Marlene, the leader of the rebel group called the Fireflies. The job consisted of taking Ellie, a teenage girl who has shown to be immune to the cordyceps brain infection, to a group of Fireflies outside the quarantine zone who are now going to take her to the main base to engineer a vaccine, all the while avoiding and going through hordes of infected. As they make it to the meeting point, the Fireflies were already dead. However, Tess wouldn't have it as she scavenges the body for a map or a note to their next destination. It is then revealed that Tess got infected on their trek to the meeting point and convinces Joel to take Ellie to Tommy, who was once part of the Fireflies. A group of soldiers arrive at the scene to apprehend Fireflies, and Tess stays behind to stall for Joel and Ellie to escape. As they are safe from their persecutors, Joel comes up with a plan to get a car from Bill, a guy who apparently owes Joel some favors. Joel and Ellie make it to the next town to find Bill and
Into the road!
This will happen quite often, but don't worry, that's for another section. Bill finds and rescues them from the horde, and Joel cashes in the favor by asking Bill for a car. He explains that he needs a few parts to get something to work, primarily a battery from a military truck that crashed in town. After crossing many blocks of infected, the group find the truck, but the battery was not there. As they escape from another horde, they end up in a house that had a car with a battery that they were looking for. They push start the car and get it to work, dropping off Bill back to his hideout. After this, Joel and Ellie make it to Pittsburgh, where they are ambushed by hunters, unaffiliated people who killed or survive. Joel and Ellie fend off the ambush and hide away until they meet two other survivors, Henry and Sam, who have a plan for escaping to the next state over to meet with other survivors. Too bad they died. What? I'm not gonna show you how they died. I can get in trouble. Months have passed and Joel and Ellie finally make it to where Tommy lives, Wyoming. Joel tells Tommy everything about Ellie and asks him to take her to the Fireflies. However, Ellie wasn't having that, so she ran away. Joel and Tommy go looking for her and find her in an abandoned house. Here, Joel and Ellie have a heart-to-heart conversation about being left alone and losing the people they care about.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel, but I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you.
On their way back, Joel tells Tommy that he will take Ellie to the Fireflies, and Tommy tells them that he has a place in their community that he can return to. So now, Joel and Ellie set off to Colorado to look for the Fireflies, but they are nowhere to be seen. It is then discovered through a voice recording that the Fireflies left to Salt Lake City because of the constant attacks by the infected.
Yeah, no shit.
As they're about to leave, they are ambushed by hunters, but this time is important because Joel gets stabbed horribly. But hey, now it's Ellie's turn to shine as she does her best to survive while nursing Joel back to health.
You're gonna make it.
Alright, so at this point is where the story is reaching its turning point. And for me personally, this is what made The Last of Us such a highly acclaimed title. Ellie hunts for food to bring back for her and Joel until she comes across two survivors, David and James, who were willing to trade anything for a deer that Ellie hunted. She barters her kill for medicine that Ellie needs to treat Joel. Soon after fending off a horde, David begins to chat with Ellie about things happening for a reason, until he reveals that he's part of the group of hunters that attacked Joel and Ellie in Colorado. Despite saying this, David still traded the medicine with Ellie. After the exchange, Ellie ran to Joel to administer the meds, but she was followed by the hunters and was eventually caught by David and brought to their base where the hunters prepare human meat for consumption. Yeah, they're cannibals. Meanwhile, Joel wakes up from his fever and starts looking for Ellie by capturing and torturing two hunters for information. Back with Ellie, David and James prepare to cut up Ellie, but with clever thinking and plot armor, she escapes their grasp until she's eventually cornered in a restaurant by David. Using stealth, she sneaks up behind David to bring him down, but after wearing each other down and David choking Ellie...
Ellie! Stop! Stop!
Fucking touch me!
Okay, it's me! It's me! It's me! Look! It's me.
He tried to...
Oh, baby girl. It's okay.
And this is the second time this game jerks a tear out of my eye. Joel and Ellie finally make it to Salt Lake City and set off to find the Fireflies, and after going through infected and shoddy platforms, Ellie nearly drowned as they were crossing a flooded tunnel. Joel tries to revive her until Fireflies find them and knock Joel unconscious. He wakes up in a hospital accompanied by Marlene, who also made the cross-country trip. Lady, if you made it here without dealing with infected or hunters... She tells Joel that Ellie made it, and also explains to him about the procedure to create the vaccine, which involves an operation on Ellie's brain that will remove the part of it that makes her immune to the infection, killing her in the process. Well, guess what? Joel ain't
Having that.
Wait! Let me go. Please.
You just come after her.
Ellie wakes up in the back of a truck with Joel driving it. She asks what happened and Joel lies to her, saying that the Fireflies found other people like her and that they were no longer looking for a cure. After a long drive and a hike, Joel and Ellie make it back to Wyoming to take up on Tommy's offer. Ellie stops Joel halfway and asks him to swear to her that what he said about the Fireflies was true, and to keep up with his lie, he complies. With nothing else to say, she accepts Joel's word as true, and the game ends. And that was the end of The Last of Us story, and what a strong way to end it. Even though this was the second time I played this game's story, it definitely gave me all of the feels that I had the first time I played it. So the question remains, what makes this game's story so compelling? Well, after playing the game a second time, I think I have the answer to that question. Now, with what I've experienced, I believe that everything boils down to one word: relatability. Now, before you go on saying,
well, actually, Zankichi, a lot of stories have relatable characters, so you're not making up discovery, it's just obvious.
just hear me out. Although it is true that many stories have relatable characters, The Last of Us gave us normal people to relate to. They aren't gifted, nor they are the chosen of prophecy or legend, just people who adapted to their situation the same way we would when faced with adversity. The only difference would be Ellie because of her immunity, but even so, she is still a person that we can relate to. She's curious despite the state of the world, her temper is that of many teenagers, she has fears of being left alone, she expresses concern for Joel and the people that she cares about, and she does her best to find meaning and purpose in her struggles. The same thing can be said about Joel, a man who lost his daughter unfairly and cruelly, and had to do whatever it took for him and his brother to survive. For him, Ellie was just another smuggling job, but she slowly grew on Joel, developing a parent-child relationship as he taught Ellie about the infected and how they function, how to handle a gun to defend herself, and overall life lessons that she may need in the future, providing Ellie with the paternal figure that she never had. It's the kind of relatability that draws people in, you know, the kind where you can sympathize with the characters. You relate with their struggles, you see yourself making the same choices that they do, and you feel the same way they feel when they're met with certain situations. Even the supporting characters solidify this idea further. Tess was tough, she got things done, and lived the day-to-day life. Bill chose to be alone after someone he cared about left him because of his paranoia. Henry and Sam were brothers who supported and looked out for each other until the end. Tommy left behind the violence to build a community with his wife and other survivors. And Marlene was willing to sacrifice someone precious to save the lives of thousands. These and the main characters made choices that we would have made if faced with those situations, and because of this we can relate to them more than we would other fictional characters. But what about the other parts of the game? Surely they had a part to play in this whole endeavor, right? Well, to start, the setting did an amazing job in putting the player in the right mood. Lush greenery, flooded subways, abandoned structures, and among other things, give the player a sense of uneasiness and astonishment as the locations are expansive, beautiful, and sometimes dreadful, as it begs the question, how did this end up like that? Another thing that heightened this game was the mutated cordyceps. Coming from Mother Nature herself, this fungal enemy was well developed and near identical to its real-life counterpart, from its infection reproduction cycle to its effects on the host's behavior. The story itself was presented excellently. The story was told in proper chronology, so it was easy to follow through and understand, and plot development had a good helping of drama, suspense, and action, so it kept interests high. Even though the story's theme of survival was overdone and exhausted, the story itself offered a new concept and twist that made it interesting and engaging. However, I do have to point out a few things that I didn't like from the game, which are the action sequences and the scavenging. These are really just nitpicks of mine, but I do have to point them out. Although the action sequences were fun, especially the ones with the infected, some of them dragged on longer than normal, and others were even unnecessary. To me, this slowed down the pacing of the story to the point that I went gung-ho on a few of these just to get it done quick. The scavenging did pretty much the same thing, and I know that's part of what survival is, but man, was it a pain to check every abandoned building for items, bullets, collectibles, documents, and other stuff. Lastly, the visuals and sounds of the game helped bring the story with superb presentations. I already mentioned the awesome scenery, but the characters don't stay behind. Each one is well made with an amazing attention to detail from head to toe. Facial expressions are on point with how they feel, body movement is realistic, and cuts, bruises, burns, dirt, water, and snow have great detail when shown on the characters. Top that with some of the best voice acting I've ever heard, a soundtrack that sets the mood, and
Clippers!
last thing I want to talk about is the gameplay. The game is a third-person shooter at its core, so gunplay and melee combat are its bread and butter, but it has a few twists that give the game some variety. First, the stealth mechanic. This gives you the option of taking enemies down quietly should you need to save your bullets for the future. This mechanic is also essential when clickers are around, since stealth takedowns are the best way to dispose of them. This is complemented by the game's listen mode mechanic, where the characters focus and listen to their surroundings to then pinpoint enemy locations. This is necessary if you want to go full on stealth mode, albeit a bit broken if upgraded, as it goes from listen mode to I see through walls mode. Another mechanic implemented in this game is crafting. Earlier I mentioned that scavenging is done in certain parts of the game with the intention of looking for items. Well, said items like clothes, alcohol bottles, scissors, and tape are used to craft survival items that will help in Joel and Ellie's journey, like first aid kits, molotovs, shivs, bombs, and so on. Scavenging also lets you find scraps, which you can use to upgrade weapons and holsters, supplements to increase Joel's physical abilities, and training manuals to make better survival items. Crafting can be done at any time, even during non-QTE action sequences. However, weapon upgrading can only be done at a workbench and requires tools to make further upgrades. All of this, topped with smooth and responsive controls, make the gameplay for this game good. No complaints on my end. So, yeah, I sang its praise. This is a good game, and it does deserve its Game of the Year title. The story is fantastic, the characters are memorable, gameplay, graphics, sounds, it's all awesome, and I enjoyed it. So, it goes without saying that the game is worth it, and that is my honest opinion. It felt really good to go back to this game and relive such an incredible story packed with emotions, and I am going to ruin it by playing the second game, aren't I? Well, let's see what this brings.